you know, been pretty much wiped clean now. It's not a thing anymore. Cyrus can talk more about drug courts, which I think is just started here.
Right, so drug courts are, I don't know if I have another slide for that, but just until recently in New Hampshire, out of the 10 counties, because counties, it was like, you know, the courts in New Hampshire separated by counties, there were only a few of them that had these drug courts. And these drug courts, slide on what the drug courts actually do. I can get into that more, but just recently, it was passed just recently, the governor signed a bill that expanded the drug courts to all 10 counties, which is fantastic because before the counties that were lacking were Merrimack, Weir, and Hillsborough, which are the most populated business counties. They didn't have drug courts, and these drug courts are proven to be very successful.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what these drug courts are doing is, you know, if you get charged with a drug-related crime, instead of saying, hey, you're going to get 6 months in jail, you know, you're going to get rehab, and as long as you maintain compliance.
Right, they're more focusing on the rehab aspect of it, and not just, it's like you can't just throw them all in jail. Jails are overcrowded as it is. So they have different programs within this drug court where they're monitored differently, but they're more so to say sentenced to rehab and those kind of educational type programs, as opposed to just throwing them in jail.
Expanded Narcan use, like we've talked about, educational services, you know, like I said, whether it's media in the community or whether it's an affected individual, you know, that education is a huge part of it. Treatment and rehab services, like which I said, you know, before, is, you know, really starting to improve. And then the drug-focused law enforcement. You know, this starts at the border, from the federal level all the way down to the, you know, cop, to the police officer walking the beat on the sidewalk. You know, they all play a very integral part of, you know, fixing this epidemic. In 2014, Governor Hassan, like I said, she signed a bill expanding Narcan use, availability, and access. And like I said before, it was pretty limited to healthcare providers, and now it's pretty much everyone can get it. I mean, there's some police departments, I think state police has it, you know, you can walk. I think now you can. I think I was talking to somebody. You can go into your Rite Aid and buy it without a prescription. So that's a good thing. Yep.
Is there a limit to how much Narcan an individual can take?
No.
I mean, max, you know, like a day, every day?
No, there's no detrimental effect of Narcan. I mean, if you give them too much, you can risk reversing it so much that you send them into withdrawals. But there's no like negative effect for Narcan. So we're only going to give that if they're incapacitated and they're having that life-threatening overdose. And you know, we'll give it as much as we need to reverse those symptoms and to get them back breathing again, conscious. What does happen sometimes is polydrug overdoses too, which, you know, when they can take you know, different types of drugs. I think what we ended up finding out was that there was an instance where I gave somebody 6 doses of Narcan just to get them breathing again, but they never quite woke up. They never, you know, they stayed unconscious and they started breathing enough to keep them alive, but they never woke up. And I'm like, that's weird, you know, the Narcan should have woke them up. Well, I ended up finding out he took a bunch of sleeping pills too. So I mean, that's another side of this that, you know, can have an effect.
How expensive is the Narcan?
I think, what'd you say, it was $50?
Yeah, $50.
Yeah.
Covered by insurance.
$50?
Yeah. You know, on the ambulance we are, what's that?
Well, how much?
I believe it, is it 1 dose or is it a kit?
Well, they give it a kit.
I think the kit, does the kit,
I don't
I think the kit comes with 2 doses, and I could be wrong. I don't know, but I know a lot of the times these kits are being given out with 2 doses. You know, on the ambulance, our medications are supplied from the hospital.
Right,
You know.
I just wanted somebody, you know,
Yeah.
family member said, I need Narcan for my family member.
Absolutely.
And if there's any help for that, if there's like vouchers or anything.
Yeah, you know, I think the first step is the Rite Aid and you know, checking with your insurance to see if, you know, insurance can cover something like that. You know, it was $50 just buying it straight up. I don't know if maybe your physician giving you a prescription for it might knock the cost off, knock some of the cost off of it, but, you know, I don't know how much that would be.
Have you found that this gives like a false sense of security to the person who's taking the drugs?
Yeah. We've gone to overdoses, walked through the door, and the individual with the person who's overdosed has said, quick, give them the Narcan. They know what's coming. They know there's that safety net out there. And that's what was kind of, like I said from the beginning, you know, getting the Narcan out there saves lives, period. But it does give them that false sense of security where, you know, I think maybe at times it might allow them to be a little more careless, maybe push the envelope a little more, and you know, it's
Just only effective if there's somebody with you. If you're doing it by yourself and you overdose, that's where mostly all of our deaths are coming from. Is people are alone; they have nobody to call.
Can I just ask a question
Absolutely,
about that? Because, you know, the fact that you could just go into the store and buy Narcan, there's something that feels unsafe about that, just in that a parent is getting it because they're concerned about their child. It just seems like anyone could come up with a reason, just out of caution or nervousness or whatever, to have this.
Yep. Back 2 years ago, there were instances where ambulances got robbed, not of the narcotics, but of the Narcan. They would steal the Narcan because, you know, if they were taking heroin, they would keep the Narcan on them. You know, your buddy overdoses, you give them the Narcan, keeps the cops away.
When you started
Yeah.
selling Narcan on the street, you know what I mean?
That has happened, yeah.
And I don't mean it in an obnoxious way.
No, that's, I mean,
You know,
it's-
along
it's-
with the,
yeah.
you track down the seller, and he's also got, you know, with one package of this, I'll throw in, 2 doses of Narcan. You
Yeah,
know,
it's-
just starts
it
to
is-
feel like, all of us having it would be unsafe because you really need some training before you have it and certainly then dispense it.
And I don't know how we could combat that. I mean, there's going to be drugs, and they're going to be drug users. It's saving their life. I don't think there's going to be more drug users because of the Narcan. But we'll never know that. Those kind of statistics we won't ever be able to gather.
Yeah, no, I mean, for anything that's going to end up saving
Saving
No, but what you're talking about is real. I can't tell you how many times this conversation right now has happened between, EMS personnel, police, and, because some people have been so frustrated that that they say, we're just enabling this problem by giving them the Narcan out there.
We also make
It's twofold because
assumptions
it's
about
also saving lives. It's
average person, any of us, if we see somebody passed out, we think, oh, must be a drug overdose, let's do that. But it's not always going to be that, and so the Narcan is not going to be effective unless it is in fact an opiate overdose. So,
fortunately, there's
so it's either going to do nothing,
Yeah.
right, or it's going to help.
or it's going to work. Yeah, and there's no negative. The Narcan in itself is a fairly safe drug. So if somebody passes out, you think they're having an overdose, you administer it, and oh geez, it ends up being a seizure. First of all, it's not going to cause any harm. And secondly, stay as a good Samaritan law where, this is, if you act in good faith and with the intention of what you thought was helping to save that person's life, nothing's going to happen because of it. It's,
What category is Narcan in? Like heroin is an opioid.
yeah, so these opioids are called, this drug we've been talking about, what's called opioid agonists. but Narcan is an opioid antagonist. So it goes to the same opioid receptor sites, but it does not cause those effects. And what it does, like I said, it displaces those opioids that are in the receptor sites causing those symptoms. So, I think, is that what you're looking for?
Other interactions with other drugs that, like say somebody had, severe drug allergies and you thought this person was, drug overdose and then you give it to them, could it interact with other?
I don't think I've ever heard of, I mean, it's a good question. I don't think I've ever heard of someone having like an allergic reaction to it or detrimental effects to it. The only, like I said, it is a very safe drug. I mean, they wouldn't, if there was risk to administering Narcan, they wouldn't widespread disperse it like they have.
Years later, that the drug,
Yeah, and that would be hard.
But it's just
hard
working on
to
the
tell.
receptor, so it's not like,
What's that?
it's just working on the receptor, so it's not like it's.
Yeah, it is a very safe drug. I mean, the only detrimental effect I can mention is that, if you give it too fast or you give too much, you can, reverse the overdose so much that you displace all of the drug, send them into immediate withdrawals, and now you've got an individual who's projectile vomiting, who's very nauseous, who's combative, who's pissed off, and, you got a whole other problem on your hands now, so. Certainly.
How long has this Narcan been around? When did they,
As long as it's been around.
I haven't heard of it just recently because this drug.
For years, right?
Yeah, so, I mean,
Years?
I've been doing EMS since 1999, and it's been there since then. In the past, it was always just one of those drugs we had in our drug box. And I think up until like 2012, 2013, we maybe gave it once a year. I mean, it was like, it was talked about the next day at the kitchen table at the bar. I was like, oh my God, we gave Narcan the other day. It was like, whoa, really? And now it's common. It's a common thing. It's not a big thing. It's been there. It's been there for, as long, like I said, as long as I've been doing EMS, and when it came into play, I don't know. On the ambulance, you have, in EMS, you really have three types of providers, types of EMS providers. You have EMT, you have advanced EMT, and you have paramedics. Most of the providers, I should say, prior to this, paramedics and advanced EMTs could administer the Narcan. With what the governor did, allowed the EMTs to give it as well, and the public. The majority of the firefighters in Hooksett are advanced EMTs, where they can give advanced life support drugs. They can provide that advanced level care. We have a few paramedics and a few EMTs, but now it's available everyone, and everyone can use it. How long it's been around, I don't know. It's been around as long as I've known.
Do you guys go to schools and show these horrible pictures to the kids? And
We-
talk about what?
We did a presentation at Colley for the parents. Colley has a very good program in the school that, I don't remember the name of the lady that teaches it, a health teacher, so forth, who went through and told the parents what they do have an education component of it that I feel they're better apt at doing that to kids than me. I know I sometimes get into the law part of it, and I'm not as sensitive about it. Joan was more than some of this would go over kids' heads. So she has a way, she's trained educationally, wise, simplifies it. What we told the parents there were, it's up to you to talk to your kids, explain to them. But yeah, I personally, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable talking to a smaller. We don't have a high school in Hooksett, obviously, so.
Manchester Fire Department has an EMS officer who does a lot of EMS public education, injury, illness prevention, and his name's Chris Hickey, and he's actually gone around and done that shock and awe presentation with a lot of the schools, but a lot of that's been high school, aimed at high school kids. And, you know, we don't have a high school in Hooksett, obviously, and I know they go to other towns, so, I mean, that's not something that, you know, we would be involved in. You know, we did talk about, we have discussed, and we did, like I said, back in April, doing some education for the schools, and, you know, because they're a little younger, I don't know that it was as appropriate to do that shock and awe with younger kids, but I do think that, you know, some sorts of education and knowledge is important for them to gain, because, you know.
Kids know us.
Yeah, and not to mention that, you know, like, you know, what I really wanted to do was this education aimed at, you know, the 7th and 8th graders, because, you know, next year, they're gonna be going to high school, and they're gonna be seeing, you know, drugs. They're gonna be faced with these, you know, circumstances where they, you know, they have to make decisions, choices, yeah.
That's what I had
The-
said, so.
The one thing to add is that talking with Principal Benson at Colley, he said that there is not a drug problem at Colley Middle School, and that's good to know. But still, regardless, you know, we do need to do that education prevention.
That's what I had said, from the law enforcement side of it too, we can say comfortably, there is not a drug problem at Colley Middle School. But those 8th graders are going off to big high schools, you know, next year, and we told parents, you know, you can't rely on the one-on-one treatment and, you know, of teachers that you get at Colley with such a smaller group, that these teachers are gonna know when your kid's acting a little different. It's up to the parents at that point, you know, they're going to schools where there's thousands of kids, they're gonna get lost, you know, they get lost in the shuffle. So that's basically what we told them, you know, we don't have a problem at Colley, but be prepared, you're sending your kid off to high school. And I have 2 kids in high school, so I can attest to that. This is something that I just found recently, which is good. Say we're kind of playing catch up, which just tells us that we've realized, and the government has realized, that there's a problem. So the following bill, I'll go through it quickly because it's getting late. This provides the $5 million for, you know, health and recovery, prevention and treatment, and then also another bill that establishes the drug courts, which you talked about, which is great. $5 million seems like a lot. It's really not. It's not going to go far with this much treatment is needed, but it's something, so we'll be positive. It's at a federally level, the Senate passed a $181 million bill named the CARE, which will provide millions of dollars in federal grants. And since I actually looked at that last night, I found that President Obama did sign it, so that'll be going in. So other states will start having to apply for these federal grants that will help us with different treatment and stuff like that. So the government is playing catch up, so which is good. We're getting there.
So one of the last things I want to talk with you guys, and this is something that's happened in Manchester, and we're looking at here for our own towns, is the fire department has created this this program called Safe Station, in the past, they've tried this in other areas of the country with police stations where they've made it public that, listen, if you have a drug problem, you can come to the police station and we will help get you to recovery programs, get you peer counseling, recovery coaches, that sort of thing, get you the help that you need. The problem with that, though, is, you know, no one wants to go to a police station with a drug problem. So the EMS officer over there in Manchester developed this program that was like that. So that people with a problem looking for help could come to a fire station, and you know, the EMS personnel, the firefighters, would provide a medical assessment, take their vital signs, get some basic info on them, and then connect them with recovery services. And it kicked off in May, at the beginning of May. I think in the first week they saw over 20 individuals, and you know, I go over and have meetings with Manchester Fire, with the EMS officer and some of the individuals on a monthly basis, We do a lot of information sharing and discussing programs, and as of the end of July, they've had 250 people come through the Safe Station program in Manchester. Yeah, it's been very successful. I know the first month, I think they saw like over 120 something people, and for the first time in years, they saw their overdose deaths and overdose calls gone down, reduced. So specifically what they do is these people come to the firehouse, and they, like I said, they're assessed, and then they're connected with Hope for New Hampshire Recovery, which I'm sure they've been in the news and the media, and they're doing great things. They're in Manchester, they're popping up in Concord, Nashua, I think Rochester, and a lot of the major cities, they're starting to establish these centers. Now, what Manchester has is they have transport capabilities. The Hope for New Hampshire Recovery Center in Manchester has a transport unit now. So that's where that ties into the Safe Station programs. When these people come into the fire station to get this help, Hope for New Hampshire Recovery is called, and their transport unit comes, picks these individuals up, brings them back to the center, and starts that recovery process. So really what the fire department has become, and fire stations have become, is that first step in finding this, in getting the help. That was one of the things that, people with these problems, these addictions would always complain about, and talk about, was that, like, they know they wanted help, they know what they needed to do, they didn't know where to start. And that's what this program seeks to remedy and solve, is providing that safe haven, that place for people to go and get that first step. Compliance with recovery services nationwide is 23%. It's 1 in 4 people that goes into recovery stays clean. It's kind of a low number. With Safe Station, they've been doing in Manchester, they've been doing it for a little over 3 months now. Compliance through this program is 73%.
Wow.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So this has been a phenomenal program, and to see it implemented on the local level is and in the fire service, I mean, just gives me a lot of hope, and makes me really happy to see the firefighters being able to offer that proactive service instead of they're able to for a change give that proactive service and that proactive care instead of the reactive care of someone overdoses and they respond and provide that care. So I mean, I think that's a real positive thing. Our new fire chief Burkish, came from Manchester. He was very instrumental in getting that program going, and we're very lucky to have him as our fire chief now. Back a month and a half ago, I asked him, we were almost in passing about, is this something we could ever do at Hooksett? Is this a service that we could do at Hooksett? From talking with the EMS officer over there, he had said that, in addition to implementing this program in his own city, he said his intent and his hope was that he could assist other communities in establishing that same kind of program in their own community. So I asked the chief, and through collaboration with Manchester Fire, the police department, Hope for New Hampshire Recovery, we're looking into offering that service at Hooksett. There is a process. We can't just start doing it. There is a process, and there's a lot of behind the scenes work to start this. We have to apply for a special license through the Bureau of EMS to do this, and so we've done that at this point, and we're waiting to hear back from them. And once we get the permission back from them, at that point we can really sit down and say, okay, how's this going to work? Can it work? If we're going to do this, how can we do this? And and that sort of stuff. So I will say that, in our own community in Hooksett, we're looking at this pretty closely of potentially offering this service in Hooksett as well. And, that would make me so happy to be able to do that for our own residents, I think it was like in Manchester, the numbers, the people come through the Save Station program, 60% were not Manchester residents. So, unfortunately, people in Manchester that buy their drugs. That's where the hub of this, problem is in New Hampshire. So, they're getting a lot of people coming to that city for that reason. Unfortunately, not the case in Hooksett. So, hopefully, if we do move forward with, this program in our own community, my hope is that, this can be really aimed at, helping our own individuals in the town, in our community, through that program. So, as that develops and comes about, we'll certainly let you know, and it'll be out there in the news, and there'll be more to come on this. So, do you guys have any questions? I have been asking questions throughout the whole thing, but thoughts, anything you guys want to share?
We know that these programs at the fire stations work, and our goal is to actually have this program here in Hooksett. What is it that you need as far as resources? To get this
Yep.
going? Is it financial? Is it people? Is it training,
Yep.
professionals, or?
One of the good things about this, like I said, we work very closely with Manchester Fire, and the cost of this was next to nothing. There was nearly no cost involved in implementing this program. There was minimal training that was needed. So essentially, what we had to do was, we got to get all the stakeholders involved on board. That involves, the town government. That involves, the police department, Hope in New Hampshire, the fire department, all the people who would be involved. Everyone has to be on board for it to work. And once that happens, we start to develop a program. Obviously, we cannot have the same type of program that Manchester Fire has. Manchester Fire has 10 fire stations. They have, I think, about 200 firefighters on duty. And not to mention they have AMR for their ambulance service, which has about 6 to 7 ambulances in the city. So we come to Hooksett, we have 6 to 7 firefighters on at a time, and we also run the ambulance. So, and with 2 fire stations, it's a little different than they would run it, and so we have to kind of tailor the program to our community. And we have to apply for what's called a mobile integrated healthcare program through the state EMS. And once they would give us the permission and the license to do that, that's when we would implement the program. And we develop a policy, all associated documentation to go with it. And then really what we would do is just do an in-service for our own personnel. Say, okay guys, when this happens, this is what we'll do, this is what you need to fill out, this is what will happen, here's who you call, that sort of thing. And then, you advertise it. And Manchester's, their startup cost was almost nothing. There was literally nothing, because, a lot of these services and the manpower and the EMS providers and so forth is already in place, and it's the same service that we offer now. It's in a proactive sense instead of a reactive.
Well, how about treatment locations? As far as if somebody needs to go into rehab for 30 or 90 days or whatever, are there enough beds?
Yeah, that's all.
What strikes me as being the concern is it's great as an entry point off the street and
Yeah, that's.
on their way to care, but
I'm not as familiar with how many beds, there was a struggle in the past,
Yeah,
with
there's always
not
been a
being enough.
struggle.
But they've really been working on that a lot lately, there's more treatment centers popping up all the time.
The other thing too with this, I mean, just recovery programs in general, not specifically Safe Station, but, it's not always putting them in an inpatient facility. Sometimes it's something as simple as hooking them up with a peer recovery coach. Like in AA, you get a sponsor, I believe it's, you have that sponsor. Sometimes, that's all that they need. And it's sometimes simple as that, sometimes they do need to go into an inpatient facility. That's not what every patient gets, or every admission's inpatient, but every individual will come through a program similar to this. That's not what they will automatically get. I mean, really, what they would get is dependent upon their needs, how bad their problem is, and so forth. So, hopefully New Hampshire recovery is great. They kind of work with the, Manchester Fire, and really look, a lot of people in the state to help provide access to those, recovery services, the peer coaches, and also place they can hook these people up with, access to like Amber's place, which is it's a non-medical, I'm gonna call it inpatient facility, but it's a facility where people can stay and kind of be in that safe, positive environment where, they have these recovery services and the peer coaching, and not necessarily from the medical aspect. And then there's other places like Serenity House that are more on that medical side of treating people, with disease processes, addiction. Any other questions?
Thank you for coming,
Yeah.
showing interest.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very
thanks
much.
for coming.